Before we begin, a few clarifications are in order. Yes, this video is about AI and video games. However, this is not about adding ChatGPT or Gemini or even Claude to my game. I don't use any AI agents in a personal or professional context, and when it comes to creative endeavors, I feel like, at least for me, using these AI agents takes something integral away from the traditional learning process. This is a development log where I attempt to hand code, without any LLM assistance if that wasn't clear, the first enemy of my game. With that out of the way, hi, I'm Contorta, and I've been teaching myself game development for the past 2 years. Now, I've made quite a few game projects over the past few years, but none of them ever reached the finish line for various reasons. So, now that I'm finally free from the hellhole that is university, I think it's high time to actually get started with a genuine project, and not one where I start and then I give up in about 2 months. So what is this project actually about? Well, the good news is I'm not going to sit down and bore you guys with lore slop or anything like that. These devlogs are really only intended to be a feature development showcase and not really much else. And finally, this brings me to the subject of today's video. This guy. This is the first enemy of my game. And here's my plan for his behavior. First, he will walk to a waypoint, spend some time, and then walk to another waypoint, rinse and repeat. However, if he hears a sound, he will investigate. If no source is found, he will just go back to the loop. However, if he gets visual confirmation of the player, he will beeline towards the player, as long as he maintains constant visibility to the player. My initial code attempt was very patchy. This isn't a tutorial, please don't learn from this, I'm lazy. So basically the main function of waypoint loop, it either moves towards the next waypoint and checks if it has been reached, or decrements the work timer and resets the wish direction. And as you can see, it works. He travels between waypoints utilizing the navigation mesh to check for obstacles and whatnot. However, it would be kind of cool if he actually looked towards the direction that he was going in. And as you can see, it works. He now looks at the velocity that he is facing. Now, that being said, he kind of doesn't react to anything. So let's give him ears. So I will admit, I am kind of cheating. As you can see, I already had like a basic sound system laid out. Essentially, whenever the player interacted with this prop, it would report out to a sound bus that would then alert the entity that a sound has occurred in that location. So all I have to do is make it so that whenever he hears a sound, he goes over to investigate.
2 hours later.
And after some coding, he now goes to the location of the last heard sound. He then investigates for approximately 2 seconds, and then goes back to whatever he was doing. Also, just as a check, I did set a range so he can't hear sounds that are like 40 meters or more away from him, which is pretty cool. That being said, he still can't see you, so let's give my AI eyes. Okay, not like that, but like, you get the point. So here is an old visibility system I coded a while ago, and yes, it is an eyeball. So in essence, it's just an area 3D and a raycast. Essentially, whenever the player is intersecting with that area 3D, the node will fire out a raycast to see whether or not it can actually see the player. And visibility is determined primarily in this function, which I won't bore you with, it's pretty simple. Dragging and dropping the perception component onto the AI works. Well, it kind of works. As you can see, he still ignores us because the visibility system isn't actually connected to the actual script. Also, sorry about my voice, I'm like under the weather right now, So for my first coding attempt, every physics tick, the entity would check visibility. And if visibility was confirmed, the position of the entity would be logged, and it would kick the loop into the chase loop. The chase loop is pretty simple, basically run towards the position, regardless of whether or not you can see the entity. And once the target is reached, a timer will start. And then when the timer expires, it'll go back to doing whatever it was doing. And it worked. He now chases you around indefinitely. The only issue is that sound events override his visibility, which shouldn't be a thing. It's kind of funny, but I'm gonna have to take it out. Hope you enjoyed the ASMR segment, but as you can see, he now ignores sounds whenever he can see you. Now, the only issue is that whenever he gets within range, he kind of freezes, which honestly, I'm fine with it right now. In the final version, he's supposed to actually kill you, but that's for later, and I have other stuff to work on.
Much later.
Hey, what's up? I've been pondering the eye. So, after a little bit of coding, the entity speed now changes based on what mode he is in. In addition, his eye color will also change to reflect his current mode. And unfortunately, here's where I ran into a little bit of a problem. You see, my goal is that the enemy would hear the player when the player was sprinting. So then I coded in a simple method that would take in the player's velocity, and then it would add the velocity scaled by delta. And then if the distance traveled exceeded a certain threshold, a sound would be emitted. Now remember when I said that this would only happen when the player was sprinting? Well, I didn't add sprinting. So now the enemy is constantly attracted to your location. If he can't see you, he can hear you, and that's kind of a problem. Unfortunately, it's my problem. But it doesn't have to be my problem today, so...
24 hours later.
Hello, it is tomorrow, technically today, which means it is, in fact, my problem. So the issue with the current character controller is that there's literally no acceleration or deceleration. You just snap to whatever your input direction is. There's not even jumping, it's really basic. A while ago, I started work on a project called Courier, and while it was in third person, the movement definitely felt really nice. So I'm just gonna copy and paste it and go from there. Update, that was a terrible idea. I tried to implement sprinting and it does not work. While there now is friction and there's actually velocity present, once you start sprinting, you can't stop until you turn. So also I did implement jumping, but as you can see, you still technically step on things even though you're in the air, which is kind of funny, but I'm going to start over from scratch.
The next day.
Alright, and after a little bit of work, the movement strip is now in a pretty good state. You can sprint and walk normally, and there's also jumping and air control. The only downside is you still jump while in the air, and honestly, I'm really procrastinating about this, but I'll just do it anyway. Oh well, that was easy. Finally, the player no longer steps on things when in the air. Cool. Oh wait, they still make noises when they're not sprinting, which was the whole point of this, so I guess I'll get to it. Alright, and one really stupid code solution later, seriously, I'm not even going to show it, the player now only makes sounds when sprinting. In addition, the player also makes sounds when jumping and landing. However, sprinting and walking normally looks exactly the same, so I added a little bit of head bobbing as well as some look spring code, and it looks significantly better. The player's head now bobs at a different speed according to whether or not they're walking normally or sprinting. Now, I don't want to focus too much on the player because this is a video about the enemy. And there's one big issue. Currently, he only faces towards his velocity, which means that even if he is chasing you, if the direction from him to you does not match the direction of his velocity, the line of sight between you two will be broken and he will effectively go into search mode even though you're technically right outside his field of view. Now, there is a pretty easy solution to this problem. In fact, the French people actually discovered this in 1793. This is a guillotine. I'm just kidding, we're just gonna open Blender and, yeah. And after a little bit of coding, he now looks in your oh, that's not right. One kid commit later. Why do I sound like Palpatine? One kid commit later, Lord Vader. I have a bachelor's, dude. What am I doing with my life? Alright, finally, he now looks in the direction of his velocity when he's not suspicious. And when he hears something or sees you, he will, you know, look at you like he should. And now that he looks in the correct direction, as opposed to just his velocity, it's actually pretty hard to escape him once he has clear line of sight to you. Alright, and with that, thank you for watching this video. This is the first piece of long form content I've made in a while, so if you have any tips or recommendations on how I should do this, please leave it in the comments down below. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to finish a public demo on itch.io or whatever in the next few weeks, but you never know. Anyways, yeah, thank you for watching.